sometimes family is going to take over because, you know, somebody's sick and you have to drop everything and be with your sick child or your sick parent or whatever. And being in this business for so long, I came when he was 4 months old, my son, so it's been 24 years. I've gone through a lot: death of a parent, very serious illnesses in children. And so there's also a very nice quote about plastic balls versus glass balls. You might have heard that you can sort of think of life as being juggling both plastic balls and glass balls. And the glass balls, you can't afford to let them drop, right? But the plastic balls you can. So like, so what that your house is messy? I have a cleaner too, but my tolerance for the dusting is like, I can't stand it. Now she comes every 2 weeks when we both wear masks and all that kind of stuff. But like, I want her to come every week because I also have a dog and a cat. I forgot to talk about the dog and the cat and those responsibilities too. Anyway, I lost my train of thought there, but I also wanted to say a couple of things about the pandemic and COVID and family responsibilities. I've been involved in a survey that went out to BC residents. This is part of the WHRI, which is Women's Health Research Institute. And, you know, maybe not surprising to everyone here, the amount of time that people spent in childcare and educating kids went up greatly, but for the women, not for men. They had a small blip, but it's the women that seem to be taking over. And depression and anxiety rates really skyrocketed for both women and non-binary folks compared to men. Everybody went up, but much more so for them, and much more so in the demographic of 25 to 35. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And I have more notes, but I think I'm way out of time, so I shall stop. I have advice too, but we can talk about that later.
Let's hear from Shahnaz, and then we might come back to you if Renisa isn't here yet. Go ahead, Shahnaz.
Okay, great. So I thought I would just talk about some of my experiences, you know, from my postdoc to now, just in the thoughts that hopes that some of you will resonate with them and not feel like you're alone in your own experiences. It's a bit more of a bio. So I had both my kids when I was a postdoc in San Francisco. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on, is just my experiences as a mom and a scientist. Back in San Francisco, we had no family, no close friends to help out. And my husband had just started a job in a law firm. Now, I tend to really idolize that time in my life. I was obviously productive enough to get my current job, had 2 beautiful kids, living in San Francisco. Thinking back on that time, I remember how incredibly, stressful it was. Because I had, my husband had a real job and my job was a lot more flexible. We both assumed, and this is me too, that I would do the majority of the daycare, of the childcare. And of course, I wanted to do the childcare, but there's this huge pull to be in the lab as well. Now, remember, in the States, you get 6 weeks for mat leave, which means you have very young babies in daycare, and babies in daycare means sicknesses. And I think there was about 2 years straight when one or the other child was sick. Now, even though I was really productive in my lab, the supervisor that I had wasn't very supportive, at least with respect to daycare. We had journal clubs that started at 5 p.m. He had 4 children himself, and he didn't remember that he had to make any sacrifices. And, he kind of forgot that he had a wife who stayed home to raise those 4 children. So anyways, so later talking to my husband, we decided that a flexible job doesn't really mean a less important job. And we really figured out how to balance things a little bit better. And that's what I'll talk about in a second. So just 2 takeaways from this time in my life. Flexible doesn't mean less important. And sometimes you're going to be surprised at who aren't your allies. So these can be fellow women, as Judith was talking about, and also Lisa, colleagues who have children who do elder care, et cetera, people who figure just because they're doing it or they did it and we're fine, that you should be fine too. Don't be discouraged about that, because your experiences are really unique, and who knows what they had to go through or what help they might have had to get through their experience. So I started UBC with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. My husband decided that he wanted to go back to law school at that point in time, but because we were living in Vancouver, he also had to work part-time. And he's incredibly supportive. And this is like the thing, find a good partner that Judith was talking about. That is so incredibly important. I still do the majority of the childcare, and I always have. I was the one who did drop-offs and pickups, daycares, homework stuff. I coached basketball and soccer for both kids for over 10 years, volunteered at school events, etc. But my husband does everything else. He does all the cooking, groceries, finances. I don't even know where the green bin is. We have somebody else clean the house for us. And so I'm really able to spend quality time with the family, like on the weekends, and focus on my work during the day. And so very similar to what was said before, the takeaways from this is that you just can't do everything. Pick the things that you want to focus on, get a cleaner, subscribe to one of those home meal kits for a few dinners each week, maybe get a nanny to pick up the kids from school, maybe, and make a meal maybe. So there's a lot of things that you can outsource, and also think about some of the things that you can live with. So I'm a bit of a neat freak as well, but I decided that my kids' rooms could be holy messes, and I just, that's okay with me. And I actually really sat down and thought about these things and made really deliberate choices so I wouldn't get overwhelmed, because just made, really sitting down and making deliberate choices about this is really incredibly important. And the second thing that I've kind of learned as a professor is to give yourself a break. Again, this is a recurring theme, obviously. There are going to be some days or weeks or even a full year that you can't devote yourself to either your family or to your work. And that's okay. I have a fantastic relationship with my kids, but in 2011, we moved. I had to renew my CIHR grant, my Alzheimer's grant. I went up for tenure that year. And I had probably a few really bad mom moments. I think that maybe everyone can relate to that who have children. And I promise you the kids won't hold it against you for the rest of your life. So give yourself a break a little bit. So I'll stop here, but I'm really looking forward to the breakout sessions and maybe talking about more tangible ways to be each other's allies.
Great. Thank you, Sharnaz. I see Renisa's here, so we'll go straight to you, Renisa.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I double booked. So anyways, I'm just coming from one event to another. It's nice to meet you all. And let's see, what can I tell you? I'll tell you the biography that you don't hear or read anywhere, which is that I'm a mother of two. I had both my kids before actually I had my son while I was in graduate school, and then both my kids pre-tenure. And I think I was the only person in my department to have kids when I first started at UBC. I'm also a daughter. I have a mother and a father that live in Vancouver. So now I'm responsible for lots of family things. And yeah, it was very exhausting to have two kids prior to any kind of job security at the university. I have a super supportive family who has, really helped me in various ways, and I include my children in that as well. So, when my kids were younger, my partner and my parents helped out a lot. But as our children have gotten older, they have really sort of even just become part of my intellectual community. So I bounce ideas off of them, and so on and so forth. And so I think one of the ways that I've been able to sort of juggle family responsibilities and career is I'll tell you things that you probably don't want to hear. One is that I always got up very early, so somewhere between 4 and 5 a.m., so that I could write. And that was uninterrupted time, because I used to work in the evening, but then I found that someone would be sick or crying or something and would need my attention. So I started getting up early and use that time. And even in the summers, even if my kids were in camp, I, would spend a few hours, like 3 or 4 hours working, and then I would have time to spend with them during the day. The other, so I always used my most productive and sort of creative time in the morning to focus on my own research. And that has been really, really effective. And yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the rest of the discussion, so I have no idea what people said. But I would agree with what I heard from Sharnaz, which is that you can't do everything, you need help. And I also think that this is a good moment for us to think about what the university can do to help us and to help people who are responsible, junior scholars who are responsible for um, children and for elderly parents and so on and so forth.
Great. Thank you, Anissa. So I'm going to open it up to the 4 speakers. I know that you guys wanted to have some time to talk just generally within each other and to the audience. So I'll just open it up so that you can do that. Lisa, I see you've unmuted yourself first, so go ahead.
Oh, great. Oh, I was just being prepared. Well, I didn't, just to add to the other advice that's there and finish off on what Renisa just said, but in terms of mentors, definitely have a lot of them. There were some mentors like the one I told you about that said, don't have another baby. And I knew I was pregnant at the time. So, I mean, I still have her as a mentor, but for different parts of my life, not for family responsibilities. But I think it's important to recognize you're going to have good mentors that are strong and for family, strong for grants, strong for being a supervisor. And that's fine. It's fine to have, just take some time to get advice from lots of different people. And the other part, because when we were talking earlier, the 3 of us, we did think that the university could do some things for young faculty and even old faculty to make our lives a little bit easier. And whether or not anything will happen or come of it is another thing. But one of the things I would say to you is reach out to people that are allies or you think could be allies and tell us what's going on. So I had a really good conversation with a couple of early career researchers because essentially they're telling me this is a problem. And part of it was for my role as the CHR health advisor. And so I can tell CHR, this is a problem, you're going to need to change this. And they actually, CHR is pretty good. They're listening maybe more so than the universities are at the moment. So as long as it's a safe person to talk to and reach out to, it's important because all of our kids are now, in their teenage to adult years. And that doesn't mean that they don't need us anymore. They still need us, but it's a much different time of our lives for sure. So reach out.
I would just add to that, to what you were saying about safe spaces. Yesterday, I heard someone speaking about brave spaces as opposed to safe spaces. We've talked a lot about, this is, for instance, our cohort here is a safe place. But we also need to have these uncomfortable conversations.
Yes,
we need to be in a space where you're brave enough to be able to say what the issues are, how you can handle it. So this was, it was kind of an interesting phrasing of it, which I think that this is what we need in terms of dealing, especially with COVID and how our faculty has been dealing with it, is we need these brave spaces.
100% agree.
So earlier we were also talking about that sometimes women don't stick up for themselves or talk about how well they've done. And part of that is finding the right language. I had an older brother, and I think if you have had to fight it out with an older brother, you know what you can do and what you can't do. But sticking up for yourself and being able to say tough things is really important.
Can any of the speakers, or Cheryl or Sarah Jane, I think might have just left, can you give us an example of where you might have been able to do that before we go into the breakout rooms?
Well, I can give you an example.
Go ahead, Judith.
When I was chair of pediatrics, I was going to be renewed, and we had done a salary thing across Canada in terms of what full professors made, what associate professors made, assistant professors made in pediatrics. And I was the lowest paid chair in the country. So I actually went to the person responsible for the level of my salary and said, I just want you to know that I am the lowest paid person who's a chair of pediatrics in Canada. And so that you can be aware that BC is not holding up its end.